Hey everybody, my name's Norm and I just finished this painting this morning. It's an acrylic painting. Now it's time to varnish it. So I thought I'd bring you along and show you some tips on how to varnish. Let's get started. So the very first thing that you should do is make sure that you're in a ventilated area, either near a window or have a fan running. If you don't have any of that, I suggest wearing a mask. So some of the tools that I like to use to varnish is I find myself a nice surface to varnish on, somewhere where the painting can sit without any dust flying through. Of course, you're going to need your varnish. I like to use, for this painting, I'm going to use a high gloss varnish. I have a little plastic container and I have a foam brush and a piece of tin foil. So these are the tools that I'm going to use, and I'll show you how it all comes together. So the reason why I use the foam brush is because the foam brush is not like a normal paintbrush. You can see here that a paintbrush, it has like bristles and it's going to leave streaks on your painting. The foam brush has less of those streaks, almost none of those streaks. So that's why I prefer to use the foam brush compared to a normal paintbrush. If you prefer using a paintbrush, I suggest that you go out and purchase a soft bristle brush. Now this brush is pretty soft. I've used it for varnish. It works well, but once it does get wet, it does leave some streaks, but perhaps that's what you're going for. Overall, my favorite is this foam brush, and they're very inexpensive. The varnish I bought is from a local art store. It's a high gloss varnish. I don't always use high gloss. Sometimes I use matte. It really depends on the painting and the effect that I'm going for. Today we're going to use this high gloss high gloss varnish. So you're going to need something to put your varnish in. I have this plastic container. It's a little plastic container that I bought like at a dollar store or something. It works great. I have some tin foil, and all you really have to do is put this tin foil inside this container, and I'll show you why. At the beginning, push down, and I'm trying to make like a small area where my foam brush will dip into. So that way I waste less of the varnish. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take our varnish and our little container with the tin foil, and we'll put a little bit in there. Okay, when you're opening up your varnish, make sure that you don't spill any. And all you have to do is just pour a little bit. Now, if you're doing a canvas with sides, which I often do, then I start painting the sides first. This is a canvas board that I just finished, so we're gonna paint just on top. All you have to do is just dip it in. You can see that it's getting a little bit on the brush, on the foam brush. Put your container off to the side, and what I like to do is I'll start in one corner and I'll make X's. And I'll just go across my painting, and you can see when the varnish starts to be used up on your brush, I like to take the brush and just slide it down in one direction. Now I do this, little X's, and then I do at least 2 coats. Sometimes it needs 3 with this varnish. Now this varnish is very, well, not very, but it's a little bit thicker than the normal varnish that I'll use. So I like it because it's like extremely glossy and it makes the painting just pop. So I'm gonna need a little bit more varnish. And again, just dipping it in there, making sure that it's on the brush, you can see it, and X's. Make sure that you get into the corners. Now, one of my things that I always do is I bend down and look at the glare of the varnish to make sure that everything's been covered. So like I was explaining, one of the things that I do is I bend down and I ensure that the varnish has covered all of my painting. If you've noticed that it hasn't in some little area, looks like this one's good, but let's say, for example, I missed a small spot, do not go over it again. Wait for your second coat of varnish. But you can see how glossy it is, and you can see from the reflection of the window that I was able to cover most of this, if not all of this, but I will put a second coat. So I'm gonna let this dry before I apply a second coat. Now applying the second coat is exactly like the first coat. Crisscross, and then you can streak across. Nice and gentle when you're going across. So you're gonna have to let this dry for a minimum of 4 to 5 hours, and then even overnight. Even overnight is better. Once it's completely dry, come back, do that second coat, let it sit again. I normally do 2 to 3, most of the time 3 coats of varnish, just to make sure that I've got all the areas covered and it has that professional look. This type of varnish makes the painting just pop out. So if you have any questions, please leave a comment on below. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and I hope that this little tip helps you out.